I sat in the driver's seat, leather cool against my palms, the hum of traffic a dull background to the chaos in my head. My sister, Grace, was still inside the cafe, oblivious to the storm brewing in my life. She had asked me to wait in the car, like I was some casual afterthought, and I obeyed, smoothing the silk of my blouse, pretending the impatience didn't sting. The phone vibrated against the dashboard, and my heart skipped a beat. I glanced down. Dean of Admissions calling. My breath caught. This was it, the moment I had worked toward for years, the phone call that could open doors Grace could never even imagine. I gripped the wheel, listening as her laughter echoed faintly from the cafe entrance. Irony twisted in my chest. She didn't know I was about to speak to the person who could change the course of my entire life. She didn't know the sacrifices, the late nights, the tears I'd hidden behind smiles. The leather smelled faintly of my lavender perfume, the dashboard warmed by the sun creeping through the windshield. I tapped my fingers nervously, feeling the weight of what this conversation meant. It wasn't just about acceptance letters or prestige, it was about proving to myself that I could rise above being underestimated, above being treated like I didn't matter. When I finally answered, the dean's voice came through, warm but professional, and I straightened my shoulders. Grace could wait. I had a future to claim. I was 16 the first time I felt invisible in my own home. Grace had her friends over, laughing in a way that made the walls vibrate, while I tried to ask Mom a simple question about school. She waved me off, busy with Grace's elaborate stories, and for the first time, I realized that in this family being quieter, being more serious, being different, meant I could be ignored. That evening, I stormed up to my room, heart hammering, hands trembling so badly, I couldn't even pick up my journal. I sank onto the edge of my bed, feeling a lump in my throat that wouldn't go away. Tears stung my eyes, but I swallowed them, angry at myself for caring so much. I hated being dismissed, hated feeling like I had no place, no voice that mattered. Grandma's voice came to me then, soft and patient, like a warm blanket. "Ellie," she said once, years ago, pressing a small, worn notebook into my hands, "don't let anyone decide what you're worth. Write your story and make it yours." I held on to that notebook like it was a lifeline. Every page became a promise to myself. I wouldn't rely on others to see my value. I would prove it. Not for them. Never for them, but for me. The next morning, I packed my backpack differently. I stopped waiting for validation from Grace, from Mom, from everyone who assumed I couldn't handle ambition. I applied myself quietly but relentlessly, tutoring after school, late-night essays, careful research into colleges that would see me, really see me. Every small victory felt like a secret rebellion, a tiny flame against the dimming weight of their neglect. I can still remember the sting of my sister's dismissive smirk that day, the way she tossed her hair and walked past, acting as though my frustration was meaningless. That moment became fuel. I promised myself that I wouldn't just be noticed, I would be undeniable. I wouldn't wait for someone to hand me opportunities. I would create them on my own terms. By the end of that year, I had already mapped out a path that no one in my family could imagine, a path where my name mattered and where I could finally speak and be heard. College felt like stepping into another universe, one that Grace and my family could never have imagined. The lecture halls smelled of old books and polished wood, the air thick with ambition and whispered possibilities. I carried Grandma's notebook with me everywhere, its worn cover a reminder that I was no longer waiting for permission. I was claiming my own life. My first mentor arrived unexpectedly. Professor Langston, a seasoned academic with kind eyes and sharp insight, saw something in me that no one else did. "Ellie, you have the kind of focus that can move mountains," he said one afternoon as I lingered after class, notebook clutched to my chest. Those words felt like sunlight breaking through a storm. He guided me through research, letters of recommendation, and strategies for scholarships that felt impossibly out of reach. I absorbed everything, late into the nights, studying while the dorms around me grew silent. I worked tirelessly, often doubting myself. There were nights I sat on my dorm floor, lamp casting long shadows, shaking from exhaustion, wondering if I'd made the wrong choice. But every small victory became my secret fuel. The first acceptance to a summer research program, the first scholarship notice, my first article published in the student journal. Each one was a quiet triumph, a reminder that I could thrive even when no one believed I would. I also learned to navigate the unspoken rules of privilege and influence. Grace had always relied on charm, on being noticed without effort, but I had to earn every inch of recognition. I built my network quietly, connecting with professors, peers, and alumni who respected talent over familiarity. I celebrated alone, on long walks under the autumn trees, imagining the day my family would realize that the quiet girl they underestimated had become unstoppable. I kept my achievements hidden from home. Every letter of praise, every award, every scholarship check, I never mentioned them to Grace or Mom. Social media posts were carefully curated, a neutral mask that hid my rising power. Inside, though, I was growing bolder, accumulating knowledge, experience, and confidence that no one could take away. By the time I graduated, I wasn't just a student who had survived the system. I was a force. I had offers in my field, invitations to conferences, and a portfolio that would make even the most dismissive family member pause. I had built an invisible fortress of success, brick by brick, powered by Grandma's wisdom, Professor Langston's faith, and my own relentless determination. And yet, through it all, the thought of Grace waiting in a cafe, thinking she could keep me in the car, lingered. It became a quiet, satisfying motivator. One day, they would see. One day, the girl they ignored would be the one they couldn't overlook. The moment finally arrived unexpectedly, almost by accident. I had been invited to a small networking brunch in the city, a casual gathering of professionals and alumni, when I saw Grace's name on the guest list. My chest tightened, a mix of irritation and anticipation bubbling up. She didn't know I had carved a life for myself that extended far beyond her narrow view. She didn't know how high I had climbed. The brunch venue was bright and airy, filled with the faint scent of fresh flowers and coffee. Sunlight spilled across marble tables, reflecting off the sleek gold accents that adorned the room. I had dressed deliberately. Tailored blazer, crisp blouse, understated jewelry, signals of success that I knew would speak before I ever opened my mouth. Grace arrived late, as always, flustered, smiling at friends who hadn't seen her in months. She looked over, finally spotting me, and her smile faltered for the briefest second. I rose to greet her, calm, composed, and entirely in control. She froze, confusion flickering across her face. "Ellie, wow, you look," her voice trailed, unsure. "I look like someone who's been working hard," I said softly, letting the words hang in the air. She took a seat, still processing, and I allowed the pause to build. I gestured subtly toward the accolades and certificates neatly arranged on the display table near the wall. The ones from prestigious conferences, the leadership awards, the acceptance letter from my dream graduate program. Her eyes widened as she recognized the names, the institutions, the opportunities. "I thought you were just, getting by," Grace murmured, a hint of embarrassment creeping in. I smiled, but it wasn't a cruel smile. It was quiet confidence, the kind that comes from years of hidden labor and relentless perseverance. Getting by wasn't enough. I've been building my career, my network, my future. Every late night, every rejection, every sleepless hour, it all led here. And yes, I'm talking to the Dean of Admissions when the opportunity arises, because I don't wait for someone else to hand me my worth. She swallowed, momentarily speechless, as I let her absorb the truth. I could see the shock, the disbelief, the subtle pang of guilt in her eyes. For years, she had assumed she was ahead, always first in attention, always the one who mattered. Now, she was confronting the quiet girl she had underestimated, the girl who had been quietly unstoppable all along. I leaned in slightly, voice gentle but firm. "Grace, I didn't tell you all this because I wanted to compete with you. I told you because it's time for you to see that people you dismiss, people you overlook, they can rise quietly and powerfully. I've earned my place, not just in the world, but in my own life." Her hands fidgeted, nervously clutching the edge of her chair. I allowed her the space to process, letting the magnitude of my journey sink in. Around us, the brunch carried on, oblivious. But in that moment, the world shrank to the truth I had long carried silently. I was not who she thought I was. I was stronger, smarter, and entirely untouchable in my self-made success. And then, finally, the recognition hit. Her shoulders slumped slightly, a silent acknowledgement that the sister she had underestimated was no longer invisible. I had transformed the waiting, the dismissal, and the pain into fuel, and now she saw it. All of it, undeniable, tangible, and completely mine. The air between us shifted after that moment, charged with an unspoken truth. Grace had always assumed she held the upper hand, that I would wait, defer, and blend into the background. Now, the tables had turned, and I felt a calm, steady power settle in my chest. I wasn't angry, at least, not in the way she expected. I was decisive. I was in control. "Listen," I began, voice steady, measured. "This isn't about punishing you, Grace. It's about clarity. I've spent years building my life, my career, and my independence. And if you want to remain part of it, certain things have to change." Her eyes widened, her lips parting slightly, as if she hadn't anticipated this conversation. I let the silence stretch, letting the gravity of my words sink in. "First," I continued, "I need honesty. No more dismissing me. No more treating me like I'm invisible. If you want my support, you need to acknowledge my accomplishments and respect the work I've put in." Grace nodded slowly, swallowing, but I wasn't finished. "Second," I said, "I want you to pursue your own path. Stop comparing yourself to me or anyone else. Find something that challenges you, excites you, that you can own entirely. I've learned the hard way that waiting for validation from family doesn't build a future. It only keeps you stuck." Her hands twisted nervously in her lap. I leaned in slightly, voice softening, just enough to let compassion shine through. "Third, and most important, learn to celebrate others' successes without jealousy or resentment. This isn't just about me. It's about building relationships that are real, grounded in respect, not old patterns of competition and dismissal." Grace's eyes filled slightly, the weight of realization hitting her. I could see the hesitation, the struggle, but also the spark of willingness to change. And I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. "I'm not shutting you out, Grace. But if we're going to move forward, it has to be on these terms. I care about you, but I will not bend to the old dynamics that held us both back." I could see the shift immediately. She straightened, shoulders back, taking in the magnitude of what I was offering. A chance for a new relationship, a new understanding, but only if she could meet me halfway. For the first time, the power between us felt balanced. I wasn't the younger sister anymore, waiting in the car, overlooked and underestimated. I was the woman who had fought for her place, who had claimed it, and who now determined the terms of engagement. And in that balance, I felt a quiet triumph, not from revenge, not from proving a point, but from the clarity and self-respect that only comes when you refuse to settle for less than what you deserve. Grace could join me in this new space, or she could remain behind in the old world we both knew so well. The choice was hers, and for the first time, I didn't have to make it for her. The weeks that followed were quiet but profound. Grace began to change, not overnight, but gradually, with small gestures that spoke volumes. She started asking for advice on applications, showing genuine interest in my achievements, and even celebrating my successes without the shadow of rivalry. I noticed it in the way she lingered a little longer during phone calls, in the soft tone she used when she spoke my name, and in the subtle acknowledgement of my efforts that once would have gone unnoticed. I watched her grow, with a sense of quiet pride. It wasn't about control anymore. It was about understanding that respect and recognition had to be earned and shared. Our relationship, once tense and loaded with unspoken resentment, began to shift towards something more balanced, more authentic. I kept Grandma's notebook on my desk, its edges worn and frayed from years of guidance and inspiration. Every morning, I'd open it, tracing the faded handwriting, remembering the promise I had made to myself so long ago, to rise quietly, to carve my own path, and to claim my worth without apology. That promise had carried me through every late night, every setback, every moment of doubt. One afternoon, I found myself back in the cafe where Grace had made me wait in the car all those years ago. I smiled softly as I looked around, remembering the impatience, the sting of dismissal, and the irony that had once burned so sharply in my chest. This time, though, there was no anger, no bitterness, only the satisfaction of a journey completed on my terms. Grace joined me at the table, a small, tentative smile on her face. "I've been thinking," she said, "about everything you've accomplished and how I want to do the same." I nodded, seeing both humility and determination in her eyes. I knew she was ready to step into her own life, not as my shadow, but as someone who could finally stand on her own. I reached into my bag and handed her a small notebook, worn and familiar. "Grandma gave me this," I said softly. "It's time for you to write your own story." And in that moment, I felt the full circle of my journey. The hurt endured, the battles fought, the victories won, and the strength I had discovered in claiming my life. I had transformed, quietly and powerfully, into the woman I was always meant to be. I sipped my coffee, the warmth grounding me, and whispered to myself a final, quiet affirmation. I am seen. I am unstoppable. And my story is mine. Bottom of form.